Hide me away, oh Lord. 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 In the day of trouble, 'neath the shadow of your wings. Hide me away, oh Lord. Hello, my name is Wilena Grigsby, and I'm married to Jim, and we have 4 children. We have 3 sons and a daughter. And we have 9 grandchildren. So we are very, very blessed. I'm going to speak on the subject, though, of in-laws tonight. And I hope that you will get some information to help you with this very tedious relationships of in-laws. I'm going to really zero in more on the mother-in-law aspect. And this is also would be very helpful for daughters-in-law too, because it tells us what Jesus wants us to be in this world, a bright, shiny light for good and not for all the bad stuff you hear about the mother-in-laws. There was 2 people talking about mother-in-law jokes, and one boy said, well, he said, what is a penalty for being a bigamist? And the other guy said, well, I don't know if there's a penalty, but I'll tell you it would be punishment if you had 2 mother-in-laws. And that is a funny one. But that's all I'm going to tell you today. I want you to concentrate on some of the things that Jesus told us to be and to do. Instead of the testimonials of your friends that knows mother-in-laws that are this way, not very happy, all the bad things you hear, let's talk about how we can better the relationships. You know, they've even named a plant after us, and it's not a good plant. It's that green one with the yellow stripes. It could be called a snake plant, but instead, most of it is called a razor sharp tongue of a mother-in-law. I mean, can you imagine a worse name of a mother-in-law plant that has a blade at the top almost that would cut your hand? I don't want to be remembered like that. I want to be loved and cherished and cared for. And I have to be that person if I receive that kind of love. Not long ago, I was at Starbucks with some of my friends, and we were sitting there having coffee. And what happened was the table filled up next to us, and it was full of young married girls that were just experiencing the woes, I guess, of mother-in-laws because they were really upset with somebody's mother-in-law. They were going on and on, even brought to tears about something. The mother-in-law didn't keep their boundaries straight. The mother-in-law didn't talk nice to them. I can't even remember. We just couldn't have our conversation because they were so sad and talking about this terrible thing called a mother-in-law. So I thought, you know what, I think that's an exaggeration. So I went home and I started my research. I started Googling, that's where you go first, everything. And I've never seen so many awful, awful descriptions of mother-in-law, stories over and over. Now, there are some good ones, but you have to look for it a lot of times because they really rag on that mother-in-law. And maybe rightfully so. We have to examine ourselves and see, do I appear that way to my daughter-in-law or my son-in-law? Oh, I pray that I don't. But you have to change your way of thinking to be able to fit into this new phase that you're in. But they said that 60 to 70% of all families, including Christian families, 60 to 70% have difficulties with a mother-in-law. That is so sad to me because I cannot explain to you how much I love my daughters-in-law. They're like gifts from God. They're so kind and sweet, and they make our sons so happy. So what is there to be sad about? So you really want to pray about that relationship and really try to be what is the word? I guess to compliment them, love them, encourage them. That's the word. Encourage them more in their role of a mother-in-law. All around you are a daughter-in-law. As we fold these daughter-in-laws into our family gently, lovingly, so they know that they have unconditional love, from us, that we care for them so much, and we have fun together, and we share good things about each other, and we build each other up. That's the girl that you're loving on, that your son chose to live the rest of his life with. So what would be the downside of that? We want him to be happy with his choice. And you didn't raise a son that's not very smart. Our sons wanted the wives that they married to fit into our families because they wanted to be with their brothers and their sister. They thought that would be a fun time to come and play games and have fun and eat together. But if they had a wife that didn't want to do that, that would stop all that immediately. So we don't want that to happen. You know, I started to base this lesson, the joy of being a mother-in-law, on Ruth and Naomi. That's the obvious choice because they did such a good job with that. But I wanted something I thought broader. So I went to Matthew 22, and it's about the Pharisee that came up to Jesus and said, "Teacher, what's the greatest commandment?" And Jesus said, well, to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And there's a second one that's just as important. To love one another like you love yourself. To love your neighbor as yourself. You know, the Bible is full of love one another's and care for each other. And that is the second most important commandment that Jesus wanted us to obey. To love God, but just as important is to love your neighbor, which means not just next door, but all the people that you come in contact with, including your mother-in-law and your daughter-in-law. So you have to remember that he's talking about everything. Why is it that we don't ever associate that with the daughter-in-law and the mother-in-law? Because we don't want to. We don't want to look at that. We happen to have one that is harder to love than maybe you thought it would be. Or maybe someone that isn't lovable hardly at all. And they don't deserve love. But God didn't say love only those that deserve it, but love each other. Love each other, one another. So that was an important thing to remember because you have to think, of course, we need to love each other if we're in a family. He said we must, and we must include the mother-in-law, even if she's not lovable. I know what some of you are thinking out there. You're thinking, if you knew my mother-in-law, you would not love her. That's just all there is to it. She's hateful. She's not inclusive. She's just not very fun to be with. She's not nice. And she gives your husband, her son, a lot of grief. You know, I understand that. I think some of that, or all those things, are probably exactly right. I mean, how could I question it when there were so many examples in all the people you talk to, of course. But Jesus still said we had to love them. And it's for our own sake, and it's also for the sake of people that see you in action. They will see, yes, she is bad, but look at her. She loves her anyway. She forgives her. She's merciful. That's what God wants us to exercise those muscles of forgiveness. Exercise those muscles of mercy. God does. He looks at us and he thinks, I want to be merciful to her because she didn't do that right, but her heart's right. I don't know what your situation is, but I do know that you cannot go wrong if you just shower them with love. Just keep giving them love and attention. Compliments, do everything you can. Even if she's very critical and nobody wants to be around her. Even if that, think how that will show the world about your heart. He even told us to love our enemies. That's how important this is to God. He even said, you must love people, even if they don't love you. We have to love our enemies. What is real love? Well, I think what he's trying to direct us to is others, not just ourselves. We can get really caught up in what we want to do. We know our trip we're taking, our new clothes, our new car, all the things that we like for us. We can get caught up in that and then leave the more important things to the side. They won't get better unless you're on your knees a lot and you're really focusing on how you can make her feel comfortable in your family. It's just very important. Many years ago, our oldest son, Lewis, was in the 5th grade. So it's been quite a while ago. And he was in the cafeteria sitting with all the football players and that do the sports and stuff in the cafeteria over at a table. Well, happened to be real close to him was a table for all the teachers, which I doubt was an accident. But anyway, while they were sitting there talking, everyone, the teacher was telling me the story. She said the second group of people came in to get their food, and in it was a little boy that was in the 5th grade, but he was so much smaller and shorter than the rest of the class. And so what happened was he could not get to the pie that he particularly liked. And he stretched and pushed and was trying so on tiptoes. And Lewis noticed that. And he went over and he said, "Timmy, can I help you?" And Timmy said, "I want this pie." And he reached out and he got, "Is that one?" "Yes." He said, "Good." He gave it to him and said, "Anything else?" "No, I'm good." And so he looked at Lewis and just beamed. Well, so did the table of teachers. And one of the teachers said, "I doubt if he came home and told you that," which she was correct in saying. But still, it impacted the teachers, and it especially impacted Timmy. Now, when God tells us to do for others and love each other and concentrate on others, we are being his hands and his feet. We're throwing love all around that God gave us. And think how he has to be merciful to us. And because so many times we don't do that. We are busy with ourselves. And God says, don't do that. Look out among you and see who needs your encouragement and your love. And so it doesn't even have to be a big thing at all. And that wasn't a big thing. But he said, God tells us over and over, shine like a light wherever you go. And make sure that people are happy if they're around you. You can go up and say something and love it. Not too long ago, it was the oddest thing that happened. I went to church early. Jim had some kind of meeting, and I was in Bible class a little bit early, so I was walking by this table that had this lady there, sitting there. And I don't see her very much. And I walked up and I said, "Hey," and I reached up down and hugged her. She was already seated at the table. And she said, she looked up at me and tears came down. She said, "Do you know I haven't been hugged in 2 years?" Now, I don't know how she got the 2 years and was counting, but that's what she told me. And so I said, "Oh, my goodness." I said, "Let me hug you again." And we laughed. And she said, "You owe me a lot more then." And we laughed about that. But here's the thing I wanted you to know. A couple of 2-3 weeks later, I was out in the foyer talking to someone, and she came up to me and she said, "I want you to go and hug so-and-so over here because this is what she's going through, and she really could use a hug." And I said, "Have you hugged her yet?" She said, "Yes, I've already hugged her." And so I went over and hugged too. That is not an odd thing to happen. There are so many people that are hungry for a touch, or just to be noticed, or just a word of encouragement, or just a compliment. Say, "You did that so well. That prayer was beautiful." Even people that have been praying up at the front for years, you can go and take the time to say, "You did that well." I'm just cannot stress that enough, because you'll find when you start doing that how many people are surprised or don't know what to do about it. But that is one of them. And I'll tell you somebody that needs that the most. If you have a daughter-in-law or you're dealing with a mother-in-law that seems all fussy and not happy all the time, those are just the ones that need your attention. They are just the ones that need someone to tell them that they love them and they did something well, or they look pretty that day. If you have a daughter-in-law that's sulking, I've heard they do that. And so what you do is notice her, give her more attention that day, and let her know that you love her. And we all have bad days, but if it's something that I've done, I am so sorry. I would never hurt you, because I love you so much. You are so sweet to my son, and make him just smile all the time. So that makes me happy. And let me tell you, go to them, love on them, tell them, I love you and I'm glad you did this. That pie you made was great. Just find something. You don't have to tell a story about it. Not at all. Because your son saw lots of things in that daughter-in-law. Just tell the truth. You have the prettiest color eyes with that blouse. They may have that. Why can't we tell them? What holds us back from telling them things like that? And let me tell you who loses when you don't. You do. You're going to lose that because you may eventually, if you don't ever get things straight, you may eventually lose your son and your grandchildren because she may get tired of being at your gatherings and your family if you don't include her and everybody love her. So remember that. That's a very important thing to remember. You don't want to ever take a chance of losing time with those grandbabies. It's just too important, just too important. As the mother-in-law, we need to keep in mind that God's plan is unfolding in front of us with that daughter-in-law and that son. It's who you prayed for. It's what you prayed for. You wanted them to marry a godly girl, and have their own sweet families like you were able to do. And yes, as mothers, we will miss our sons being there, getting into the cake before it's time, or all the things, and keeping the refrigerator door open all the time. All those things that we carry in our heart that we laugh about. But I can tell you, we have to remember that God had a plan. And, excuse me, and his plan is for our sons to have the opportunities that we have. So we need to remember that. I know why sometimes we act like that. It's because we carried that son under our heart for 9 months. We carried him to the doctor when he was sick, when he was little. We watched him when he got his first little tooth in, and we felt of it, and he just bite down because it felt good. When he took his first step, when he held your hand, and when he was old enough to go to kindergarten. We have those precious memories all the time. It was so sweet when he was little. And he needed us. Even when he got his seat in kindergarten, if you'll remember, usually they look back to make sure you're still at the door. You haven't left them yet. It's precious times. So, of course, we miss that. And we are somehow are missing the moment-by-moment living when we have children because we're so busy. But all of a sudden, he's going to college, not kindergarten. All of a sudden, he's packing his bags for that. And he is getting ready for college. And you can't believe it. And then it's not long after that, he's bringing home this real sweet little girl. And you love her, but you're not ready for that really yet. But he is. And he gets to choose. He's a grown-up now. And then the wedding bells begin to ring. It's such a beautiful time, and it's a new phase in our life. I knew that my mothering days had changed forever, and that my role in my children's lives would never be the same. And that sounded and seemed hard for me, but at the same time, it was the answer to my prayers. I wanted them to have this moment. I wanted my children to go and be strong enough to go and love God, love other people, love each other. I wanted that for them. That was my prayer. It was happening. God was answering. It was time for me to remember that I had a different role in my children's lives now. It wouldn't be the same as it was. That isn't bad. It was time for me to cut the umbilical cord. It was time. We knew that our children had chosen well. We knew that I smiled when I thought about the verse, leave and cleave. And so I feel very thankful that it has worked out like it does, because I love the new children I have that they have brought into our family. They don't feel like somebody else's child. They feel like ours. We love them so much, and they love us back. Now my sons are focusing on their new wives, their children, their life, their vacations, what they did with us. Now we are very different. We have a different way of having our life. We're busy, and I would advise anybody that says goodbye to the last child to get a hobby, get something you do. I love to write. I love my friends over for Bible studies. We are busy all the time, and so is Jim. So we're not sitting home mad because we don't have them there. That is the worst thing you can do, is say, well, I'm surprised you came, or I'm surprised you answered the phone. You're gone all the time. Oh, that would be fun to have that for a mother-in-law. Don't do that. It only hurts you. It only hurts you. Remember, that is not how God's plan is. In closing, I want you to remember that you don't want to be remembered as the razor-sharp tongue mother-in-law. Don't do that to yourself. Find the joy in almost everything that you have. Find the joy and share it with everyone. And in every effort, make every effort to make your daughter feel very welcome in your family. Tell her she is not an outsider, and don't treat her like one, because she isn't an outsider. She is part of your family. Aren't you blessed? Think of it. She is not an outsider. Never put, and this is very important, your son in the role of peacemaker. Don't ever go to your son and say, your wife said this and your wife did that. I wish your wife would be a better parent. Does she not ever cook for you? Don't do that to him. Don't ever put him in the middle of what you're trying to do or accomplish with that daughter-in-law. Don't do it. You be the peacemaker. You're the mother-in-law. You can bring in the pie. You can bring in the joy. You can bring in all the fun experiences. You could take your daughter-in-laws to lunch. You can take them and buy them some new shoes. Take them and just enjoy the new position that you're at. Never make him choose between the two of you. Listen carefully to that. Never make him choose between the two of you. And let me tell you the most important reason for that. You know what will happen? You will lose. I guarantee you will lose every time. And it's also very ungodly. But you'll lose because he's going to choose her. She's that warm, snuggly, soft new friend that loves him more than her life, and he loves her the same. He's not going to take your side. I guarantee you. Your husband wouldn't have either, and didn't probably. Always remember that you and your daughter-in-law are allies. And if you are kind and welcoming to her, loving, pay attention, laugh with her, cry with her, whatever is needed, you be that person for those daughters-in-laws. And as far as sons-in-laws, I'm telling you that if you hit one like ours, you won't have to do anything but hug his neck because he's so sweet. But if you have a hard one, you have to be kind to them too. You must remember you're the one that sets the pace for how you will live this life. But if you are kind and welcoming to his wife and love her and she's happy, you just remember your son will have enough love for the both of you. He will. He'll love you just the way he's always loved you, but he just can't give you the attention. He's giving it to her, and wouldn't you feel bad if he didn't? So, if you live like that, I promise you, your home will be a beacon of love, and all that pass by will be welcome, because all that pass by are literally your neighbor, and you're fulfilling God's command. God bless you in this journey, and I hope everything is wonderful for you, because it's a wonderful life in this journey if you just learn to be quiet and think before you speak and do a lot of hugging and loving.
Hide me away, oh Lord. Hide me away.